Hello friends, welcome back to my channel BioCafe. So today we are going to discuss about sexual mode of reproduction because earlier we had discussed about asexual mode and the various types of asexual mode of reproduction, right? But something related to bacteria as well as some of the unicellular organism which show the variation that we are going to see today first, and then later on we will move towards the sexual mode of reproduction. Earlier also in my previous video I had talked about certain variations which are taking place in this unicellular organism, and these unicellular organisms which are there, they are showing variation in terms of their reproduction also. Why they are showing that? Because of some of the unfavorable conditions are there, they are making them to do that, as well as certain situations make them to carry out this process, that is of reproduction, in a little bit modified manner, and that is quite interesting. And that process in bacteria or in some of the lower organism, it is known as conjugation. What it is known as? It is known as conjugation. So conjugation is nothing but a kind of fusion, or I can say joining, right? Earlier in asexual mode of reproduction, we had come across the character, and that character was only single parent is involved, correct? But here, when I'm talking about this conjugation, you will see that two organisms of the same species as well as of the different species come together, means the organism remains the same, but the species which are there, they can be different or they can be the same one, right? So when two of the species come close together, they form a connection between them, and this connection will lead to the exchange of genetic material, and therefore we are categorizing this category, right? It is quite interesting to know that it is nothing but a kind of sexual mode of reproduction. Already when we are going to see for a sexual mode, so you will come across this term that, or you will come across this character that the male gamete as well as the female gamete, they are going to fuse and they will exchange their genetic material, therefore we are calling that process as sexual mode of reproduction. Here also the same thing is happening, right? So this can be seen in bacteria as well as some of the protozoans, for example paramecium, right, and some of the lower organism. So today we will discuss for this two, that is bacteria and paramecium, right? Now let us begin with this for paramecium and bacteria. Bacteria, this is the structure you might have studied in your 11th standard, right? So this is the structure of bacteria, right? And you will be amazed or you will be surprised that bacteria is also having a factor, and that factor is known as F factor. And this F factor which is there, it is called as the fertility factor, right? And those bacteria which are having this F factor present in them, they are called as F plus bacteria, that is fertility factor possessing bacteria. And those bacteria which are there where no F factor is present, they are called as F negative or F minus bacteria, right? Now when I am having one of the bacteria with F plus, that is with F factor, and one bacteria which is there, it is F minus, right? F factor here in first case it is present, and in second case it is absent. I think this much is clear. The bacteria which is having fertility factor, it is called as positive, that is F plus, and those who are not having this F factor, they are called as F minus. Now the next concept, means the next procedure after having this positivity factor, that is fertility factor F plus and F minus. So one of the F plus bacteria will fuse or will come in contact with the F negative bacteria, right? So when they are coming with in contact with each other, so these F positive bacteria which is there, it will form a extension, and that extension which is there, it is known as pilus. It is known as pilus. So this pilus will be getting attached to the F negative bacteria, and slowly what you are going to see that the genetic content which is there in this bacteria, that is going to be transferred into the F negative bacteria. And after this, what will happen? The F negative bacteria will also become F positive bacteria, because whatever the content which was there in F positive bacteria, that is now had transferred into the F negative bacteria. Let me make it more simpler. We were having F positive bacteria which came into contact with F negative bacteria. Now what this F positive bacteria had done, it had extended the structure, and that structure is known as your pilus. Now when this F negative bacteria is in close proximity, so they will fuse with each other forming a bridge, and therefore you will see that this content which is there, it is getting exchanged from F positive to F negative, right? And now you can see that the bacteria which was F negative also becomes now F positive, and therefore this procedure goes on, and the F factor which is there, it will make the bacteria more fertile, means it adds on to the fertility and helps in the cell division. I hope that this process is quite interesting and you had understood this. Now let us come and talk for paramecium. Now in paramecium also the same thing happens. One paramecium which is there, and second paramecium is also there. So both of them will come close to each other and they will form a bridge in between them near their oral grooves, where they are having the nutrient content to get inside them. So from the oral groove or the region near the oral groove, you will see that, and you will see that a bridge is formed, and that bridge is your protoplasmic bridge. After having the fusion, that is both of them are getting fused first, then they are forming the bridge. After getting this, some of the changes which are there, they are taking place in the nuclei of your paramecium, and repeated mitosis and meiosis is happening, and you will see that ultimately at last the micronuclei of one is getting transferred to the next, and the micronuclei of next, it is getting transferred to the previous one, like this, right? So this is what actually is happening in paramecium, that is the conjugation. So first I can say that in case of paramecium and in case of the process of conjugation, the two individuals who are combining or who are conjugating with each other are called as conjugates. They are called as conjugates. It is G, conjugates. And after conjugation, they are called as X conjugates, because they had carried out the process of conjugation and now they have left apart, as well as they have exchanged their genetic material, and therefore we are calling them as X conjugates. I hope this term and this process is clear in your mind. So in bacteria is having which factor? F plus, F factor, that is fertility factor. Those bacteria who are having this fertility factor are called as F plus, and those who are not having this F factor are called as F minus. When F plus comes in contact with F minus, they will the F plus bacteria will form a outgrowth structure which is called as pilus, and due to this pilus the genetic content of F plus bacteria is getting transferred into F minus, right? So this F minus bacteria now becomes a F plus bacteria, and this is what actually is seen in this in the case of bacteria, and that is known as your conjugation. In the same way we are having for paramecium also. Two of the paramecium are coming close to each other and they are exchanging their nuclei, and therefore we are calling it as sexual reproduction in this particular paramecium. At higher level you can be more clear with the divisions which are happening in this process of conjugation which are taking place in paramecium, that you will see later on in your higher classes, right? So coming back to our topic, that is sexual reproduction. So earlier we had come across all the types of asexual mode of reproduction, but right now we are going to study and discuss about sexual mode of reproduction. So let us begin. So the figures which are there showing, you can see that one of the figure, that is the third one, is of sperm and egg, and the second one is in flower, and the first which is there, you are seeing that the honeybee is sucking the nectar of the flower. Actually the thing is, the picture, the first picture where you are going to see the honeybee which is there, or the bee which is there which is sucking up the nectar, it is actually acting as an agent to transfer the gametes, right? That we will see later on in this topic, right? So coming back to the characters first. So sexual mode of reproduction is that mode of reproduction where you are going to see that male and female gametes are going to be produced. The male will produce the male gamete and the female will produce the female gamete. The male gamete which is there, it is called as the sperm or anthrazoid, and the female gamete which is there, it is called as egg or ovum, right? So when we are having this production of male and female gametes, so they are produced by different individuals also and by the same individuals also. Here they have written the same thing. Now coming back to the topic, the sexual reproduction, the process of sexual reproduction which is there, it is leading to the production of offspring, obviously, because in asexual mode also we have seen that new offsprings are produced, but those offsprings which were produced in asexual mode of reproduction, they were identical, they were exact copies of their parent. But here the organisms or the offsprings or the new ones which are produced due to the sexual mode of reproduction, they are not identical or they are not the exact copies in terms of external appearance to their parent. We can say that they are similar to their parents because they will have some of the different characters in terms of their looks and in terms of their behavior and some other features, right? So here you have to understand that whatever the offsprings are produced from the from the sexual mode of reproduction, they are not identical to their parents, they are quite similar, but I cannot or we cannot say that they are the exact clones, right? So variation is seen in sexual mode of reproduction. Now due to this feature only we can add to the third character that variation is seen during the sexual mode of reproduction. First character is that gametes are produced, male gametes and female gametes. Second character is that the offsprings which are produced, they are not identical to their parents, but they are little bit or they are similar to their parents. Then third character is that variation is seen. Why variation is seen? Because when we are going to see this process in detail later on, so you will come across the term that after fusion of male and female gametes, so you are going to see genetic exchange or genetic material is getting exchanged in the formation of zygote. What is the term zygote called as, that we will see later on. But first you have to understand here that variation is seen. How variation is seen? Because when the male gamete is fusing with the female gamete, already male gamete is having its own genetic content and female gamete which is there, it is having its own genetic content. So both these contents are getting mixed with each other and you are going to see that a new genetic content is formed with both of this characters or both of the genetic content, right? So you are going to see a mixture is produced and that will result into different characters, and this is how we are saying, or due to this reason only we are saying that the offsprings which are produced from the sexual mode of reproduction are not identical to their parents. Now you can see that the sexual mode of reproduction which is there, it is quite elaborative process as well as it is slow one and complex process. It is not that much easy which we are imagining. Next is, what are the phases which are there in the life cycle of an individual or an organism? So the phases which are there, there are three phases. First phase which is there, it is called as juvenile phase. Second phase which is there, it is called as reproductive phase. Third phase which is there, it is called as your senescent phase. Now here what they have written, or they have written for juvenile phase. So juvenile phase is that phase where you are going to see that the organism which is there, it is taking birth. First the birth will take place of that organism, and this organism will start to grow. This organism will start to grow and reach a period called as maturity period or sexual maturity period, right? So I can define juvenile phase is that period from birth to the sexual maturity. So it is a period between birth to the sexual maturity. So I need to explain this first. Now let us talk about I have mentioned three phases. First phase is juvenile phase. Second phase which is there, it is your reproductive phase. And third phase which is there, it is the senescent phase. First phase which is there, that is juvenile phase, it is the early phase. It is the early phase which is seen in the organism's life, and this phase starts from the birth and it ends towards, or it ends till the sexual maturity is attained. यानी कि ये एक ऐसा पीरियड है जो बर्थ से शुरू होता है और सेक्सुअल मैच्योरिटी तक रहता है. After attaining sexual maturity, the organism becomes reproductively mature. यानी कि क्या होता है कि एक बार वो सेक्सुअल मैच्योरिटी अटेन कर लेता है, यानी कि अडल्ट स्टेज में आ जाता है जहाँ पर उसके रिप्रोडक्टिव ऑर्गन्स जो है वो डेवलप हो जाते हैं. सो दैट पर्टिकुलर थिंग विच इज़ देयर, इट इज़ कॉल्ड एज सेक्सुअल मैच्योरिटी. एंड आफ्टर दिस सेक्सुअल मैच्योरिटी और आफ्टर दिस जुवेनाइल फेज, you are going to see that the organism enters into the reproductive phase. The reproductive phase is that phase where you are going to see the organism is capable of reproducing, right? It is that phase where the organism is capable of reproducing as well as capable of producing the gametes. If the organism is male, then it will produce the male gamete, and if that organism is female, then it is going to produce the female gamete, right? So that particular phase is known as your reproductive phase. The last phase which is there, it is your senescent phase. Senescent phase is the phase of old age, right? When the organism becomes old. As the phases pass on, that is after juvenile phase, reproductive phase will start, and after reproductive phase means during the senescent phase reproduction cannot take place, means it can be there, but in most of the cases you will see that the process of reproduction stops, and at last you are going to see that the organism which is there, the organism becomes old one, and ultimately the organism dies. So I hope that all the three terms are clear now. Right? So this is what actually the juvenile phase try to make us clear with. Now you are going to see that the organisms which are there, right? So they are having these three phases. First phase is your juvenile phase, second is your reproductive phase, and third phase is your senescent phase. So here they are describing about the reproductive phase. As already I had mentioned, after the juvenile phase you are going to see that the reproductive phase starts, right? But this reproductive phase which is there in some of the organism, it is very much difficult to find, right? And this is seen in the perennial plants or perennial organisms. But in annual and biennial organism you can easily identify this phase, right? So it is described here that annual and biennial plants which are there, they show clear cut vegetative and I can say vegetative, reproductive as well as senescent phase. One thing I forgot here to mention is that in animals, the juvenile in animals the early phase is called as the juvenile phase, but in plants the same early phase is called as the vegetative phase, right? So here in higher plants the flowering which is there, it indicates the end of the vegetative phase, and it remarks or it tell us about the beginning of the reproductive phase. Annual and biennial plants which are there, they are going to show clear cut vegetative phase, vegetative in the sense juvenile phase only. Then reproductive phase is also clearly seen, and in and senescent phase is also seen. But in perennial plants which are there, they are it is much more difficult to identify this uh, reproductive phase. Now there are some plants which are there. Now there are some plants which show a variable, or I can say a modified or a little bit strange flowering pattern, right? The flowering which is there, it is occurring not on a regular basis, or we cannot have a regular flowering in some of the plants. For example, bamboo, where you are going to see once in a lifetime the bamboo plant is going to produce the flower, and at the same time so many fruits are going to be produced, and that at that particular period the bamboo plant is now going to die. So once in a life the bamboo plant is going to produce the flower, and it is the period between 50 to 100 years. In the same way, when you are going to see in the in the second one, in the second one, that is Strobilanthus kunthiana, that is Nilakurunji. Second picture which is there, in that flowering occurs once in 12 years. So after 12 years you are going to see that flowers are going to produce in this species. So this is quite a strange pattern of flowering seen in some of the plants or some of the organisms. Now next is the case where you are going to see that in animals the juvenile phase which is there, it is getting over after the sexual maturity is completed. Means once the organism is getting sexually matured, means all the reproductive organs which are there, if it is the male, then all the male reproductive organs, if they are maturing and they are capable of producing the gametes and as well as for the process of reproduction, then we are having the phase, the reproductive phase, right? So this is what actually they had mentioned over here. So however, so birds are capable, the birds are capable to reproduce continuously, because the condition can happen that they are kept in captivity also. For example, poultry birds, that is hen and all, so they are continuously breeding, right? So it is not that we are making them to have those breeding process, that is induced breeding we are calling it as. So that you have to keep in mind, right? So next thing which is there, it is regarding the phases which are seen during the reproductive phases or reproductive phase. So what are the phases seen in reproductive phase? First You are aware that during the juvenile phase you have studied that at the end of the juvenile phase sexual maturity is there and all the reproductive organs are getting matured. After the maturity you are going to see that reproductive organs are able to produce the gametes and they are able to carry out this process called as reproduction, right? So now we have to categorize the organisms, that is especially the females, for this reproductive phase purpose. Those which are there bearing the placenta, they are called as placental females, and those which are lacking this placenta, they are called as non-placental females. So non-placental females are your non-primates and placental females are your primates. The when we are talking about this term, that is placenta bearing mammals or placenta bearing organisms are called as the primates, especially mammals. And when you are having the non primates, so placenta is absent over there. Now during this reproductive phase you are going to see that certain cyclic changes are going to happen, and these cyclic changes are taking place in terms of in terms of the hormones as well as the environmental factors, due to which you are going to see that the changes are seen in the ovaries which are present in the females. So due to the changes which are there in the ovary and hormone and the environmental factors, certain cyclic changes are taking place. That changes which are there in placental females, that is in primates, we are calling it as menstrual cycle, and those which are there called as non-primates or non-placental bearing mammals, so in that we are calling it as estrus cycle. Let me make it more clear. So accordingly I am going to tell you. First we are talking about reproductive phase, and this reproductive phase we are specially talking for the females, right? So first type is your primates. The mammals which are having the placenta are called as here primates, and those which are not having, they are the non-primate mammals. So we are talking here for the females. So placenta is present here in primates, and here placenta is absent, no placenta. Then in menstrual here in primates you are going to see that menstrual cycle is happening. Menstruation or menstrual cycle is happening. Here you are going to see that in non-primates estrus cycle is going to happen. This menstrual cycle, it is due to the hormonal changes, right? And here also in estrus cycle the hormonal changes are taking place. During this menstrual cycle you are going to see that three phases are going to happen. First phase is your menstruation, where the bleeding occurs. Second phase, your proliferative phase, where the ova or the egg is going to develop. Third phase is your secretory phase, where secretion is going to take place. For this menstrual cycle we are going to study in chapter number 4 in detail. So right now you have to just understand that in primates menstrual cycle takes place. Estrus cycle which is there, it is also known as heat period. It is also known as heat period. Menstrual cycle which is there, it is lasting for menstruation lasts for 3 to 4 days, and the cycle runs every 28 days, 28 to 30 days. But estrus cycle which is there, it is having the phase, or it is running for a period of 12 to 20 hours, right? But in menstrual cycle we have seen that bleeding occurs, but here in estrus cycle no bleeding occurs. Menstrual cycle, why bleeding occurs? Because the wall of the uterus, that is the innermost wall which is there, endometrium, it is getting broken down, and that blood which is there, it is coming out of the vagina in terms of menses. But here in estrus cycle you are going to see that the endometrium wall of the uterus, after breaking, it is not going to come out in the form of blood, but it is rather getting reabsorbed into the body of those non-primates. and therefore we are calling it as the estrous cycle. Now, during this menstruation, the female will not allow the male to copulate or to reproduce in menstrual cycle. But here in estrous cycle, during this period only, the female is going to have the reproduction. It is the favorable period for the non-primates to have sex as well as to have the reproduction process. So during this period, that is during the estrous period only, the females will allow the male to have the reproduction or copulation. Now, I hope that all these things are clear. Now let us see for the example primates, apes, monkeys, human beings, and non-primates which are there. You can see cow, deer, dog, sheep, all these are your non-primates. So I hope that the difference between the estrous cycle as well as menstrual cycle is now clear, and this is there taking place during the reproductive phase. And during the reproductive phase, not only this particular changes are happening, you are going to see that hormonal changes are going to happen. The levels of estrogen, progesterone, all these hormone, earlier you had studied in your 11th standard that estrogen, progesterone are the female hormones, right? So there the changes which are there, they are taking place in the levels of this particular hormones, and due to which you are going to find that cyclic changes are happening in the uterus, right? And this is what is there called as menstrual cycle in primates, that is apes, monkey and humans. But in non-primates it is called as the estrous cycle. I hope that the points are now clear for you all. Right? So these are the same points which are mentioned over here, so not going into that detail. Now, depending upon the phase, that is reproductive phase, you are going to see that some of the organisms which are there, they will produce or they will reproduce only at a particular season, and some of them will produce continuously. So those which are having the reproduction continuously throughout their life span, that is throughout the reproductive phase, so that particular or those particular organisms are called as continuous breeders, and those who are having only season wise breeding, that is called as your or those organisms are called as your seasonal breeders. अब breeder का मतलब क्या है? Those who are involved in the process of reproduction, these are nothing but your breeders, right? So seasonal matlab they will have the breeding or they will have the mating or reproduction process during a particular season only. जैसे कि आप देख सकते हो कि most of the organisms they are having the mating process during the monsoon, right? And there are some of the individuals who are continuously having the breeding. For example, continuous breeders में हम humans भी ले सकते हैं, as well as we can take this rats and all. We can have the examples. But in seasonal breeders, you are having the pictures. You can just see them. Right. So based on the breeding season, mammals are of two types. That is seasonal breeders and continuous breeders. So I hope the terms are now clear with you all. Now the third phase which is there after your reproductive phase is your senescent phase, and it is that phase which is also called as the old age phase, where the organism is not that much capable of reproducing, and the why this organism is not able to reproduce so much effectively, because slowly as the animal or as the organism grows, the metabolic activities which are taking place in that particular organism, they are going to be slowed down, and due to this reason you are going to see that the organism is now not capable of carrying out different activities with that much efficiency. So therefore we are calling this phase as old age phase or senescent phase, and after all this thing, ultimately the organism is going to die. So this is what actually the statement is saying to us. In plants and animals, the hormone causes variable changes. That is the transition between the reproductive phase, juvenile phase, as well as the senescent phase. And all these things are having a major impact of what? Major impact of your hormones as well as the environmental factors. So now we are going to start with events, that is the stages of sexual reproduction. But I think that for today it is the thing where we have to stop, and tomorrow I'll be continuing with all the phases which are left now, the events or the stages which are left for the sexual reproduction, right? So just in general I'll be talking for all these terms: pre-fertilization, fertilization and post-fertilization. Prior to fertilization, whatever the events are taking place, these are called as your pre-fertilization, and after fertilization, whatever the events are taking place, they are called as your post-fertilization. So pre-fertilization is again divided into two, that is gametogenesis and gamete transfer, that we are going to see in our next video. I hope that you had liked my video, as well as if you are new to my channel, then please do subscribe it. And if you are having any of the doubt in related concepts, so then you can just mention your doubt in the comment box, and do like the video and keep sharing. Stay healthy. Thank you so much.